Trump and Harvard seem to have formalized their divorce. Here's Wolf Blitzer, who I thought went into therapy after that interview with the IDF spokesman a year and a half ago. We haven't seen much of him lately, but I guess he's still working. So here he is.
In canceling all these remaining government, Trump administration canceling all these remaining government contracts with Harvard, $100 million worth.
Yeah, it's a lot of money there, and those are the remaining federal grants. So essentially what we know is that the administration is expected at any moment, as soon as this afternoon, to send a letter to federal agencies telling them to cancel all of their existing federal contracts with Harvard. But it actually goes further than that. It tells them to not consider Harvard, but consider other options in the future instead of Harvard, which would effectively kill the entire grant program with the federal government. Now, I want to read you part of the letter that CNN obtained. This is what's expected to go out. It says, "We recommend that your agency terminate for convenience each contract that it determines has failed to meet its standards and transition to a new vendor." It says, "Going forward, we also encourage your agency to seek alternative vendors for future services where you had previously considered Harvard." Agencies have time, but just until June 6th to respond with what cancellations they have actually done. And remember, Wolf, as you guys have just noted, this is just the latest in an ongoing escalation. I want to take a look at what we have seen from the White House, from the administration when it comes to Harvard, really for the last month here. Starting back in April 14th, they froze $2.2 billion in grants. April 15th, they threatened Harvard's tax-exempt status. April 17th, they demanded international student records. May 13th, they froze another $450 million in funding. May 22nd, they moved to bar international students. May 26th, they considered redirecting $3 billion from Harvard to trade schools. And then, of course, May 27th, we're here where we are expecting this White House to send this letter, the GSA, General Services Administration, to send this letter to federal agencies to cut those remaining federal contracts. So clearly an escalation here. Of course, as we know, Wolf, the administration has accused Harvard of having liberal bias, of allowing anti-Semitic behavior on campuses, among other things.
Wait. Breaking right across the wire here. Trump administration restores funding to Harvard after they agree to admit a minimum of 99 displaced Afrikaners per year. Wow. Look at that. That was close, huh? That was close one.
They were calling me. They were so desperate they couldn't replace the espresso machine in the cafeteria. The students were having a sit in there for espresso.
Yeah.
Give us espresso or give us death, they were chanting. It was very, we haven't been able to construe it as anti-Semitic. Try.
Yeah, exactly. No such luck, unfortunately. Trump intends to cancel all federal funds directed at Harvard. So the Times had the breaking on this morning. The Trump administration is set to cancel the federal government's remaining federal contracts with Harvard University worth an estimated $100 million, according to a letter sent to federal agencies on Tuesday. The letter also instructs agencies to find alternative vendors for future services. The additional planned cuts outlined in a draft of the letter obtained by the New York Times represented what an administration official called a complete severance of the government's long-standing business relationship with Harvard. The administration has cast its actions against Harvard as a fight for civil rights. It has accused the university of liberal bias, of continuing to use racial considerations in its admission policies despite a Supreme Court ban, and of allowing anti-Semitic behavior on campus. Which one of those accusations is not like the other, I wonder? The university in Cambridge, Massachusetts, has cast the fight as one over its First Amendment rights and accuses the Trump administration of trying to control its personnel, curriculum, and enrollment. Faced with government demands that included a ban on students hostile to the American values, quote unquote, an audit of the political ideology of students and faculty to ensure viewpoint diversity, and quarterly status updates to the administration, Harvard has vigorously pushed back in federal court. In one lawsuit filed last month, Harvard seeks the restoration of more than $3 billion in federal funding. In another filed last week, it has asked a federal court to reinstate its right to enroll international students. That's right, as the CNN report detailed, a ban on international students. Last week, Judge Allison D. Burroughs temporarily reinstated Harvard's right to enroll international students, and a hearing on Thursday will determine whether that order should be extended. The Trump administration letter cited what it called a pattern in which Harvard had shown a lack of commitment to non-discrimination and our national values and priorities. So this is a situation where I believe, I mean, this is a classic example to me of where you're generally right for the exact wrong reasons. Like, it's amazing to me how they could be so blind to what they're saying. Like, look, I've said this long before we had a show. I said this since I graduated high school. This is what I feared about college, is what I hated while I was in college, and this is what I hold a very strong and probably unhealthy grudge about ever since I left college, which is that the pipeline from the university, especially the elite university, to a position of power and influence over the society is a net negative to society, and it's something that has only gotten worse in recent decades. When you look back, look at our past handful of presidents. Donald Trump, Wharton, UPenn, that's Ivy League. Obama, Ivy League. George W. Bush, Ivy League. Bill Clinton, Ivy League. H.W. Bush, Ivy League. Notice the only exception there, dumb guy Joe Biden. And that's really an asterisk in a lot of ways. Number one, he wouldn't have become president if were not for COVID. But also, number two, he's been in office since 1972. Like, he was a relic of a bygone era. When you look at the last 40 years, we've been governed by people who have gone through the Ivy League system. So I do think that is unhealthy. And I do think that the relationship between the state and these universities should be severed to a large degree. Obviously, if there are scientific research institutions and medical research, okay, I would say make an exception there, which of course Donald Trump does not. But when you look at the rationale for this, that's not the argument they're making. They're just saying you're not enforcing the right values. That's all they're saying. They're saying we want to impose our own DEI standards, basically, on Harvard. And if they won't agree, then that relationship is going to be severed. So because this is being done for the exact wrong reason and for such a shallow reason at the end of the day, I do think that the next Democrat who comes in office is going to patch this up and it'll be back to business as usual. I don't see this going much further than Trump's term in office. I can't imagine a President Pete Buttigieg not restoring funding.
Yeah, but you're
Harvard.
assuming it's not going to be President Vance.
Well, I'm saying if and when another Democrat wins, I'm saying, like, if and when that happens, it'll probably be restored because their argument here is just so incredibly shallow. You're not vetting. We're going to do an audit of your students' ideology. I mean, what could be more authoritarian than that? What could be more woke than that at the end of the day? We're going to audit you for viewpoint diversity. So they're not objecting to the sort of structural and systemic problem of this pipeline from elite university to Washington. They're just saying that that pipeline is being filled with the wrong stuff, basically. Well, we want to teach America great, America always, and as long as you do that, we'll keep the system intact.
I think for a lot of us who have been making an argument against these elite universities, this is certainly a bittersweet moment. And a lot when Trump makes gestures like, and Trump says a lot of things, right? He says gas is $1.99, so you can't take what he says seriously.
Right.
But when he makes a gesture like, I want to put this money into trade school, I mean, that is like a classic left kind of a proposal. Like, yeah, let's defund the elite universities and put the money into trade schools. Of course, it's hard to see that and not feel a certain thrill. But yes, this is what we always warned about. Over the years, we covered the excesses of the culture war from the liberal side, and the core of the argument was always that this day was inevitably going to come, that you were going to end up empowering people who were going to do a lot more than simply ask that you not have pornographic books in their children's junior high schools. You want to fight about that. You see what you're going to get. And now we're here. You wanted to try. People are very sensitive about their kids, particularly about their kids. When you started insisting that people's children had to be exposed to your ideology, under the guise of education, you made a vicious backlash against all of your ideas, even the good ones, inevitable. And here we are, man. I've said it again and again. By the time you got to the 90s, people like DeSantis with these kinds of views, these moral majority people, they were a joke. They were a joke. They were the butt of every college and teen sex comedy, right? Was the foil was the uptight preacher, was the moralist. Everyone laughed at these people. By taking these ideas to such an extreme, and beyond that, taking them beyond your family and how you want to raise your own family and trying to make it a standard and insisting that anybody who didn't subscribe to critical theory broadly described was a bigot, was a racist, really insisting and mocking people, rubbing their faces in it with all kinds of posts about how you're coming for their kids. Like, how did you think that was going to end? The arrogance that they had in thinking their power because of institutions like Harvard that were reinforcing this were unassailable. Now, why did this happen? This is because when it left people who see themselves as left, they believe in progress, right? By definition. When you cut off all avenues for economic progress, when you cut off all avenues for really restructuring and rejiggering the economy, the class basis of our society, well, how do you sell them on the idea that you're making progress? You have to sell increasingly bizarre culture war propositions. But every action creates a reaction. So you took that to that extreme. Now you brought people like this to the fore. Does Harvard karmically deserve everything it's getting? Yeah, I mean, setting aside all the culture stuff, I mean, this is a breeding ground for McKinsey ghouls like Pete Buttigieg, who have no interest in the social contract or the social good, who wrap themselves up in virtue signaling, while sitting there trying to figure out how to raise milk prices on behalf of milk companies. I mean, this is what this produces. But also, I mean, to your point, this isn't really going to change anything. Harvard ain't the only Ivy League school. You know, I mean, they've gone after a couple of them. There are plenty of others. Like, in the end, if Trump decides that to make himself feel like a big man, he needs to take down Harvard, the only result of that is rich people just don't send their kids to Harvard. They send them to Princeton. They send them to one of the others. They just won't send them there.
Well, what surprised him about Harvard is that they didn't bend the knee. Don't forget, Trump expected that when he gave them the ultimatum, they would bend the knee just like Columbia did. But they didn't. And to what you're saying, it's not, yes, I mean, they karmically deserve it, but it's not just that they karmically deserve it. It's that in very tangible and material terms, these universities, I would argue, have done as much, if not more, than any other institution to make the economic system unchangeable, because that was the deal going into the 2000s, coming out of the industrial age into the information age, which is that you needed to abandon the idea that you're going to start working on the factory floor and work your way up to a white collar job. No, the people who work with their hands are going to be relegated to that their entire life. And the way to jump the line into a position of management where you make real money is to go to college. Now, these Ivy League institutions are the extreme version of that, which is what I say, like, nothing emblemizes the sort of fixed nature of the economic system more than them, which, of course, made the only political grounds worth fighting a cultural one for so many people. And yes, that invites a backlash, and ultimately they are being defunded on culture war grounds because they can't pass a MAGA audit of their students'
but this is also why
ideology.
People don't. But this is also why there's no one there to defend you. Nobody's going to jump up and say, "Oh, we have to protect Harvard."
No,
people, even people who are not Trump acolytes by any means, like ourselves, are going to take a certain pleasure in seeing Harvard squirm. I mean, I'd say that is a pretty solid majority position. I would love to see some polling on that. Would you like to see Harvard no longer exist? I mean, I think you'd have pretty well over 50% if you ask people that. I'd be surprised if you didn't.
I think so too.
You brought that on yourselves, man. There was a time, look, there was always a certain skepticism of intellectualism in this country, but overall, places like Harvard were seen as the pride of America and American institutions serving American interests at one time. It's been a very long time since people saw it that way, and they brought that on themselves. They very much are one of those institutions that made themselves synonymous with the neoliberal project. They were the think tank of neoliberalism.
Hey, thanks for watching our video. We're currently raising money to produce our documentary film on the Uhuru movement. Go to givesendgo.com/do dissidents to chip in.
Every dollar you give goes towards the project. We do not take any kind of salary on these. We mostly live on Gatorade when we're on the road, so even solid food is iffy, just enough to get by. But we do not take any pay for this. Every dollar actually goes into what we need to shoot the project. The Uhuru movement is a subject that really deserves more exposure. Everybody heard about it through the court case, and that was an important thing to elevate. But they've done incredible community work demonstrating a different way that is socialist and not dependent on the government at the same time, which a lot of people don't even realize that still exists in the tradition of the Black Panther food and education programs. And to show there is such a strong community like that with such strong leadership is really important, particularly at this historical moment.
Yeah, so we're really excited about doing the project, but we need your help. So go to givesendgo.com/do dissidents to chip in. Thanks very much for your support.
Please clap.